The bronze needle pierced flesh with surgical precision, each puncture deliberate and calculated. In the dim light of an Athens workshop, far from the marble columns and philosophical debates that defined the city's public face, a different kind of ritual was taking place. Alexios, a veteran hoplite who had survived 3 campaigns against the Persians, lay motionless as the tattoo artist. A former Thracian slave known only as Skios worked his ancient craft into Greek skin. This was not the Greece that historians typically celebrate. Hidden beneath the gleaming armor and noble rhetoric of classical warfare lay a darker, more primal tradition that connected Greek warriors to the barbarian cultures they claimed to despise. The practice of ritual tattooing before battle was a secret kept within the warrior brotherhoods, a tradition so controversial that it was deliberately omitted from official histories and philosophical treatises. The pigments being driven into Alexios's shoulder were not ordinary inks. Skios had prepared them according to formulas passed down through generations of Thracian shamans. Crushed charcoal from trees struck by lightning, mixed with the blood of sacrificed animals, and herbs gathered during specific phases of the moon. But most shocking of all was the final ingredient: ash from the cremated remains of fallen enemies, collected from battlefields and preserved in sacred vessels. The design taking shape on Alexios's skin was equally disturbing in its symbolism. A stylized owl, sacred to Athena, but twisted into something far more sinister than the wise bird of the goddess. Its eyes were hollow sockets, filled with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering lamplight. The wings stretched across his deltoid muscle, each feather detailed with microscopic precision, but ending in talons that dripped what appeared to be blood, achieved through the masterful use of red ochre mixed with iron oxide. This was no mere decoration or religious symbol. The tattoo was a form of spiritual armor designed to invoke the protection of Athena's martial aspect, while simultaneously marking the wearer as someone who had crossed the threshold between civilization and savagery. Greek warriors who bore such marks were announcing to the world and to themselves that they had abandoned the constraints of civilized warfare. The process itself was a form of ordeal, a test of endurance that served multiple purposes. As the hours passed and the needle continued its work, Alexios entered a trance-like state induced by pain, meditation, and the mild psychoactive properties of the herbs mixed into the ink. This altered consciousness was believed to open the warrior's mind to divine guidance, allowing the gods to speak directly to those about to enter battle. But the psychological implications went even deeper. By voluntarily submitting to hours of ritualized pain, Greek warriors were conditioning themselves for the agony of combat wounds. The tattoo process served as a form of advanced military training, teaching soldiers to function effectively while experiencing severe physical distress. Modern military psychologists recognize this as an early form of stress inoculation therapy, a technique still used to prepare special forces soldiers for capture and interrogation. The location of the tattoo was as significant as its design. Placed on the right shoulder, it would be visible to enemies when the warrior raised his spear in attack position. The psychological impact on opponents who recognized the markings was devastating. They knew they faced not merely a trained soldier, but someone who had undergone spiritual transformation to become an instrument of divine vengeance. As dawn approached and Skios completed his work, Alexios examined his transformed shoulder in a polished bronze mirror. The tattoo would take days to heal, during which he would perform daily rituals to activate its protective properties. But already he could feel the change within himself, a coldness settling over his emotions, a detachment from the normal concerns of civilian life. The owl's hollow eyes seemed to stare back at him with an intelligence that was not entirely his own. He had become something more than human and something less. The price of supernatural protection was the gradual erosion of his humanity. a trade that Greek warrior culture deemed not only acceptable, but necessary for survival in an age of constant warfare. The mathematical precision behind Greek warrior tattoos revealed a sophisticated understanding of sacred geometry that modern scholars are only beginning to appreciate. What appeared to casual observers as decorative artwork was actually a complex system of mystical mathematics, each line and curve calculated to channel divine energy and psychological power. Pythagoras himself, founder of the famous mathematical theorem, had studied with Thracian mystics who taught him the numerical relationships that governed both music and warfare. His secretive brotherhood incorporated these principles into tattoo designs that functioned as wearable talismans, each geometric pattern serving as a kind of spiritual technology designed to enhance combat effectiveness. The golden ratio, 1.618, known to the Greeks as the divine proportion, appeared repeatedly in warrior tattoos, governing the relationships between different elements of the design. The spiral patterns that adorned many warriors' arms followed the same mathematical sequence found in nautilus shells and flower petals, connecting the wearer to the fundamental patterns of nature's own creative force. But these were not mere aesthetic choices. Greek military theorists had observed that certain geometric patterns seemed to induce specific psychological states in both the wearer and those who observed them. Circular designs promoted feelings of completeness and protection, while angular patterns created impressions of aggression and threat. The most effective tattoos combined both elements in carefully balanced proportions. The process of creating these designs required years of study and apprenticeship. Master tattoo artists, known as stigmatographoi, underwent training that combined artistic skill with mathematical knowledge and mystical understanding. They learned to read the subtle signs that indicated which designs would be most effective for individual warriors, studying muscle structure, bone alignment, and even personality traits to create customized spiritual armor. Archaeological evidence from Greek burial sites has revealed the sophisticated tools used in this craft. Bronze needles of varying sizes, each designed to create specific line weights and textures. Geometric instruments for ensuring perfect proportions. Even early forms of stencils carved from bone and wood that allowed complex patterns to be reproduced with mathematical accuracy. The pigments themselves were prepared according to alchemical principles that combined practical chemistry with spiritual symbolism. Black inks represented the void from which all creation emerged, while red pigments symbolized the life force that animated warriors in battle. Blue, obtained from rare minerals imported from Egypt, was reserved for the most sacred designs and was believed to connect the wearer directly to the realm of the gods. The most shocking aspect of these tattoos was their progressive nature. They were designed to evolve over time. Initial designs would be created before a warrior's first major campaign, but additional elements would be added after each battle, creating a visual record of military achievements that was literally written in flesh. Veterans could be identified by the complexity and extent of their tattoos, each addition marking another step in their transformation, from human soldier to divine instrument of war. The geometric patterns also served a practical psychological function during combat. In the chaos of battle, when fear and adrenaline could overwhelm rational thought, warriors could focus on the familiar shapes tattooed on their bodies to maintain mental clarity. The patterns served as anchoring points for consciousness, preventing the complete dissociation that could prove fatal in close combat. Some designs incorporated optical illusions that made the wearer appear larger or more threatening. Parallel lines that seemed to vibrate when viewed peripherally, concentric circles that created hypnotic effects, angular patterns that suggested movement even when the warrior was standing still. These visual tricks added another layer to the psychological warfare that was such an important element of Greek military strategy. The mathematical perfection of these tattoos also carried deeper philosophical implications. Greek warriors who bore such markings were making a statement about their relationship to cosmic order. They had aligned themselves with the fundamental principles that governed reality itself. This was not mere superstition, but a sophisticated form of applied metaphysics that treated the human body as a microcosm of universal forces. Modern researchers studying these ancient designs have discovered that many follow patterns now recognized in chaos theory and fractal mathematics. The Greeks had intuitively grasped mathematical relationships that would not be formally described until the computer age, incorporating them into tattoo designs that functioned as primitive information storage and processing systems etched directly into human skin. The most disturbing aspect of Greek warrior tattoos was not their design or symbolism, but the materials from which they were created. The inks that stained warrior flesh contained ingredients so shocking that modern historians have struggled to accept the archaeological evidence, preferring to dismiss ancient accounts as exaggeration or mythology. Yet the proof lies buried in Greek battlefields, preserved in clay vessels that have survived 25 centuries underground. Chemical analysis of residual pigments has confirmed what ancient sources described. Greek warrior tattoos were created using inks mixed with human remains, specifically the ground bones and dried blood of defeated enemies. This practice connected Greek warriors to the most primal aspects of warfare, transforming the act of killing into a form of spiritual communion. By literally incorporating their victims into their own bodies through tattoo pigments, warriors were performing a form of ritualized cannibalism that would have horrified the philosophers and politicians who shaped public Greek culture. The process began immediately after major battles, when specialized collectors would move across the field, gathering materials for future tattoo sessions. These ghoulish figures, known as necrophagoi or corpse-eaters, were both feared and revered within warrior communities. They possessed detailed knowledge of human anatomy and preservation techniques, skills that made them invaluable to the military machine while marking them as social outcasts. The bones of enemy dead were cleaned, dried, and ground into powder using bronze mortars and pestles designed specifically for this purpose. The resulting bone meal was then mixed with charcoal and other pigments to create a range of colors from pale gray to deep black. The psychological impact of this process cannot be overstated. Warriors were literally wearing the remains of their enemies, carrying the dead with them into future battles. Even more shocking was the use of enemy blood in red pigments. This vital fluid was collected immediately after death, while it still retained what Greeks believed to be the life essence of the deceased. The blood was then processed using techniques borrowed from Egyptian mummification practices, treating it with natron salt and aromatic resins to prevent decomposition while preserving its mystical properties. The spiritual beliefs underlying these practices were complex and contradictory. On one hand, incorporating enemy remains into tattoo pigments was seen as a form of ultimate victory. The defeated warrior became literally part of the victor's body, their strength and courage absorbed and transformed. But there was also an element of respect for fallen enemies, a recognition that brave warriors deserved to continue existing in some form, even after death. The creation of these pigments followed strict ritual protocols that transformed the grisly process into something approaching religious ceremony. Specific prayers were recited while grinding bones, invoking the protection of Ares and Hades, while requesting permission from the spirits of the dead. The work was performed during the dark of the moon, when the boundary between life and death was believed to be at its thinnest. Different enemy cultures contributed different qualities to the pigments. Persian bone meal was prized for its supposed ability to grant wisdom and strategic thinking, while Thracian blood was sought after for its association with berserker rage and fearlessness in combat. Celtic remains were valued for their connection to supernatural powers, and Egyptian materials were treasured for their preservation techniques and connection to the afterlife. The tattoo sessions using these human-derived pigments were elaborate rituals that could last for days. Warriors would fast and purify themselves before beginning, entering a trance-like state that allowed them to commune with the spirits of their incorporated enemies. The pain of the tattoo process was seen as a necessary ordeal, a form of spiritual birth that created a new hybrid being combining the essence of multiple warriors. The psychological effects on the warriors themselves were profound and often disturbing. Many reported dreams and visions featuring their tattooed enemies, suggesting that the incorporation of human remains into their bodies created genuine psychological trauma. Some warriors claimed to hear the voices of the dead during battle, offering tactical advice or warnings of danger. But perhaps most shocking of all was the gradual dehumanization that occurred over time. Warriors who bore tattoos created from enemy remains often described feeling disconnected from normal human emotions, as if the presence of foreign spiritual essence within their bodies had fundamentally altered their psychological makeup. They became living monuments to the dead, carrying the weight of countless defeated enemies within their own flesh. This practice created an elite brotherhood within Greek military society, warriors who had literally consumed their enemies and been transformed by the experience. They were both revered and feared by their own comrades, recognized as the most effective fighters, while simultaneously being viewed as something no longer entirely human. The ultimate revelation about Greek warrior tattoos was perhaps the most shocking of all. They were not merely decorative or even protective, they were designed to ensure that the wearer would never truly die. Through a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and spiritual belief, Greek military culture had created a form of immortality that came at a terrible price. The tattoos functioned as a form of spiritual binding, connecting the warrior's life force to the collective memory of his military unit. Each design contained encoded information about the warrior's deeds, victories, and fallen comrades, creating a living archive that would persist even after the individual's death. When a tattooed warrior fell in battle, his markings were carefully documented by surviving comrades, ensuring that his story became part of the eternal record maintained by the warrior brotherhood. But the true horror lay in what happened to warriors who survived too many battles. The accumulating spiritual energy from multiple tattoo sessions, combined with the psychological weight of carrying enemy remains within their bodies, gradually transformed them into something that was no longer entirely human. These veterans, known as athanatoi or deathless ones, became living ghosts who existed in a liminal state between life and death. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these transformed warriors outlived normal human lifespans by decades, maintaining their physical strength and combat effectiveness well into what should have been old age. But this extended life came at the cost of their humanity. They lost the ability to form normal emotional connections, to experience joy or sorrow, to participate in the ordinary pleasures of civilian life. The most disturbing accounts describe warriors who had become so heavily tattooed, so saturated with the spiritual essence of their enemies, that they could no longer sleep without experiencing the dreams and memories of the dead. They carried within their own minds the complete life experiences of dozens of defeated foes, creating a cacophony of foreign thoughts and emotions that gradually overwhelmed their original personality. These psychological transformations had physical manifestations as well. The skin around heavily tattooed areas would take on an unnatural pallor, as if the pigments were somehow draining the life force from surrounding tissue. Veterans often developed a distinctive odor, not unpleasant, but strange and otherworldly, like the scent of grave flowers or morning mist over ancient battlefields. The Greek military establishment was fully aware of these effects, but considered them an acceptable price for creating the most effective fighting force in the ancient world. The Athanatoi were deployed in the most dangerous missions, used as shock troops, whose supernatural endurance and complete lack of fear made them nearly invincible in combat. They were the secret weapon that helped small Greek city-states defeat vastly larger enemy armies. But the psychological cost to Greek society was enormous. Families watched their sons and husbands transform into creatures that retained their physical appearance but had lost their essential humanity. Wives found themselves married to men who could no longer love. Children grew up with fathers who viewed them as interesting but ultimately irrelevant biological processes. The most heavily tattooed warriors often requested to be sent on suicide missions, seeking death as the only escape from their transformed existence. But even in death, they could not find peace. Their tattoos contained enough spiritual energy to prevent their souls from properly departing to the underworld. They became trapped in a state of undeath, neither fully alive nor completely dead. Some of these ancient warriors may still exist today, according to local legends in remote areas of Greece. Shepherds in the mountains of Arcadia tell stories of strange figures glimpsed at dawn and dusk, men in ancient armor whose skin bears intricate tattoos that seem to move and shift in peripheral vision. These beings are said to be neither hostile nor friendly, but simply indifferent to the modern world, eternal guardians of secrets too dangerous for contemporary humanity to know. The practice of warrior tattooing gradually died out as Greek military culture evolved and became more civilized. The philosophical schools of Athens and the political reforms of democratic city-states created pressure to abandon these barbaric customs in favor of more rational approaches to warfare. The last confirmed Athanatoi disappeared sometime during the Hellenistic period. Their fate unknown, but their legacy preserved in the darkest corners of Greek historical records. Modern military researchers who have studied these ancient practices express both fascination and horror at the psychological sophistication of Greek warrior culture. The deliberate transformation of human beings into supernatural killing machines represents a level of systematic dehumanization that rivals anything seen in contemporary warfare. Yet the effectiveness of these methods cannot be denied. They created soldiers who were genuinely superior to normal human fighters, beings who had transcended ordinary limitations through sheer force of will and spiritual discipline. The tattoos themselves have inspired modern research into the psychological effects of body modification and ritual scarification. Military psychologists have identified similar patterns in contemporary special forces units, where extreme training and combat experience can create psychological states that resemble the ancient Greek transformations. The line between enhancing human performance and destroying human nature remains as thin today as it was 25 centuries ago. The shocking truth about Greek warrior tattoos forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of heroism and the price of military excellence. These ancient fighters achieved legendary status not through noble sacrifice, but through a deliberate abandonment of their own humanity. They became monsters in order to defeat monsters, trading their souls for the power to protect their civilization. Their legacy remains etched not only in historical records, but in the collective unconscious of military culture worldwide. Every soldier who has experienced the transformation that comes from extended combat, every warrior who has felt themselves changing into something harder and colder than they once were, carries within them an echo of those ancient Greek Athanatoi, the deathless ones who purchased immortality with their humanity. If this deep dive into the shocking secrets of Greek warrior tattoos has left you stunned, make sure to subscribe for more hidden truths from ancient history that textbooks don't dare reveal. Hit that like button if you never knew about these disturbing practices that shaped one of history's greatest military cultures. And drop a comment telling us which ancient warrior tradition you want us to expose next. Your support helps us uncover the dark secrets that have been buried for millennia.